The Testing Ground of Human Political Systems, Lessons from the Rise and Fall of Ancient Rome, Part 2. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar, the Roman dictator, was assassinated. In his will, he named his adopted son and grandnephew Octavian as his heir. In 43 BCE, Octavian formed the Second Triumvirate with Mark Antony and Lepidus, defeating the senatorial aristocrats who had conspired to kill Caesar. In 36 BCE, he stripped Lepidus of military command, and later, in the Battle of Actium, he defeated Antony and destroyed the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. Upon returning to Rome, Octavian began to consolidate absolute power. In 30 BCE, he was confirmed as tribune of the plebs for life, and in 29 BCE received the title of imperator. By 27 BCE, he was granted the honorific title Augustus, which functioned much like how Mao Zedong was referred to as the Great Leader during China's Cultural Revolution. The title imperator similarly paralleled the notion of supreme commander. As a dictator, Augustus ruled Rome for 43 years. He ended a century of civil war and ushered in a long era of peace and prosperity, historically known as the Pax Romana. Augustus greatly expanded the empire, annexing Egypt, Dalmatia, Pannonia, Noricum, and Rhaetia, extending Roman control in Africa, and completing the conquest of Hispania. However, he suffered major setbacks in Germania. He reformed the Roman tax system, developed a network of roads with an organized courier system, established a standing army and the Praetorian Guard, created police and firefighting services, and oversaw the reconstruction of most Roman cities. Augustus died in 14 CE at the age of 75, reportedly of natural causes, though rumors persist that his wife Livia poisoned him. His stepson Tiberius inherited the throne, solidifying the Principate into a true autocratic monarchy, the Roman Empire. The political system created by Augustus, historically known as the Principate, was essentially monarchy in the guise of a republic. In this sense, it resembled Hitler's Führerprinzip in the Third Reich. Yet while Hitler's authoritarian rule in the 20th century led to utter catastrophe, Augustus managed to pass his power to his successors. After his death, the Roman Senate deified him and renamed the month of August in his honor, a legacy still preserved in the Romance languages. This illustrates that in early human societies, there remained channels through which human authority could be mythologized into divine legitimacy. Still, in the long run, the fall of the Principate was inevitable. After Augustus's death, his adopted son Tiberius ascended to the throne, marking the beginning of hereditary succession to the imperial title. The period from 27 BCE to 192 CE is known as the Early Roman Empire, which comprised three dynasties: the Julio-Claudian, the Flavian, and the Antonine. The Julio-Claudian dynasty began with Augustus and ended with Nero, totaling 5 emperors, all of whom were related by blood or adoption to Julius Caesar and Augustus. This era witnessed the centralization of power and the strengthening of imperial autocracy. A bureaucratic apparatus began to form, consolidating the rule of the Roman slave-owning aristocracy, with the emperor as its head. In 68 CE, Nero committed suicide. The following year, 69 CE, became known as the Year of the Four Emperors. After Nero's death, Galba became emperor, ending the Julio-Claudian dynasty. He had previously served as consul and governor of several provinces. However, shortly after Galba's accession, Otho launched a rebellion, assassinated him, and declared himself emperor. Otho, in turn, was defeated in civil war and ruled for only 3 months. Vitellius, who had won the first battle of Bedriacum, succeeded Otho as the 3rd emperor of that year. Later that year, Vitellius was defeated by the forces loyal to Vespasian. Vespasian became the 9th emperor of Rome and reigned from 69 to 79 CE. He was the last of the 4 emperors of that chaotic year and succeeded in restoring stability. The Flavian dynasty, started by Vespasian, had no blood relation to Augustus and lasted only 27 years. In 96 CE, the 3rd Flavian emperor was assassinated, and the Roman Senate appointed Nerva as emperor. The subsequent Antonine dynasty marked one of the most prosperous and flourishing periods in Roman history and is often referred to as the Golden Age of the Roman Empire. The 5 emperors of this dynasty are known as the 5 Good Emperors of Rome. Nerva, founder of the Antonine dynasty, was regarded as a wise and just ruler. He implemented reforms to improve the political and economic conditions of the empire. Trajan was one of the most outstanding emperors of the dynasty. He expanded the empire's territory, achieved numerous military victories, and made significant contributions to infrastructure development. Hadrian, an exceptional military commander, was also a patron of the arts and culture. He focused on strengthening the empire's frontiers and had a lasting influence on architecture and cultural life. Antoninus Pius was known for his mild and benevolent rule, dedicating his efforts to maintaining peace and stability. During his reign, public welfare and the rule of law were emphasized. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, was renowned for his wisdom, courage, and sense of justice. He remained calm and steadfast in the face of internal and external threats. During the Antonine dynasty, the Roman Empire reached its greatest territorial extent, from Spain and Britain in the west to the upper Euphrates in the east, from North Africa in the south to the Rhine and Danube frontiers in the north. The Mediterranean became an imperial sea. The economy reached an unprecedented level of prosperity. Christianity emerged in the mid-1st century CE and rapidly spread throughout the 2nd and 3rd centuries. In 192 CE, the last emperor of the Antonine dynasty, Commodus, was assassinated, plunging Rome into nearly a century of chaos. This marked the end of the early Roman Empire. During the early Roman Empire, 3 major dynastic names governed Rome. However, these were not strictly defined by blood relations. For example, the Julio-Claudian dynasty included emperors who were not biologically related. Despite changes in imperial surnames, the Roman Empire itself remained structurally intact. Rome was not merely the Rome of the emperors, it was also the Rome of the Senate, the representative institution. In a certain sense, it was also the Rome of the Roman people. As a state, Rome had acquired independent institutional functionality. It was an entity that no longer depended on any specific ruler's presence. No one was buried or sacrificed for the fall of any single dynasty. This testifies to a fundamental political truth: politics is a transcendent structure. Yet, at this stage, the Roman Empire had not yet freed itself from the constraints of human nature. The final emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, Nero, remains one of the most infamous tyrants in Roman, and indeed European, history. His reign was marked by cruelty. He murdered his mother and several wives, executed many senators, and harshly persecuted Christians. He was believed to have orchestrated the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE, and came to be remembered as Nero the Bloodthirsty. In 68 CE, rebellions broke out in Gaul and Hispania, ultimately bringing an end to the Julian-Claudian dynasty established by Augustus. The final emperor of the Antonine dynasty, Commodus, is portrayed in the Historia Augusta as, from childhood, he was a vile and untrustworthy man, cruel, lecherous, foul-mouthed, and morally degenerate. Indeed, he was treacherous and depraved, murderous, arrogant, and debauched. Following the popularization of the Hollywood film Gladiator, Commodus has re-entered public consciousness. The film captures the essence of his character quite accurately. According to British historian Edward Gibbon, the reign of Commodus marked the beginning of the Roman Empire's decline. The historical records of these two individuals, Nero and Commodus, have come to symbolize a truth. Tyrants are always closely linked with historical collapse. This starkly reminds us that politics must break free from the trend of personalization. To achieve this, universal values are the fundamental cure for such systemic ailments. The Severan dynasty succeeded the Antonine line and was founded by Septimius Severus, a North African who had previously served as governor of Pannonia. Historians refer to the period from the dynasty's founding in 193 CE until 235 CE as the late imperial era. In 212 CE, Emperor Caracalla issued the Constitutio Antoniniana, which granted Roman citizenship to all free men within the empire. However, in 235 CE, a military mutiny erupted, and the last Severan emperor, Alexander Severus, was killed. The army then elevated Maximinus Thrax to the throne, bringing the Severan dynasty to an end. This marked the beginning of what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century, also known as the military anarchy or imperial crisis, a period from 235 to 284 CE during which the Roman Empire was nearly brought to collapse by three simultaneous crises: foreign invasion, civil war, and economic breakdown. To secure the army's loyalty, emperors were forced to provide massive bribes. Severus had raised soldiers' pay significantly and offered frequent donatives. His successors were burdened by these ever-increasing military expenses. Following his father's advice, Caracalla again raised soldiers' salaries and issued lavish benefits to maintain their allegiance. After 235 CE, Rome's internal situation deteriorated rapidly. Germanic tribes invaded, and the emperor adopted a policy of appeasement. As a result, the army lost respect for the emperor. Soldiers assassinated Alexander Severus and proclaimed the legionary commander Maximinus Thrax as emperor. He became the first of the so-called barracks emperors. These rulers often had no political experience, party affiliation, noble background, or dynastic legitimacy. They were simply proclaimed emperor by the legions under their command. The Senate, unable to accept an emperor of humble origin, opposed Maximinus. Thus began a year of chaos in which 6 different men successively claimed the imperial title, only to be killed one after another. In 238 CE, 2 officials in the African provinces rebelled against Maximinus, but were swiftly defeated. The Senate then declared 2 senators, Pupienus and Balbinus, as emperors. However, Maximinus was assassinated en route to Rome by his own troops, the Second Parthian Legion. Shortly after, Pupienus and Balbinus were also murdered by the Praetorian Guard. In the following years, numerous Roman generals slaughtered one another in pursuit of the throne, neglecting the empire's defense. In 260 CE, Emperor Valerian was defeated and captured by the Sassanid Persians, and later died in captivity. In 268 CE, Emperor Claudius II won a decisive victory at the Battle of Nisus. Historians consider this battle a turning point in the crisis of the 3rd century. After Claudius died of plague in 270 CE, his former cavalry commander at Nisus, Aurelian, became emperor. Between 270 and 275 CE, Aurelian led the empire through some of its darkest years and began a fragile recovery. However, in 275 CE, Aurelian was assassinated, triggering another wave of short-lived and violently replaced emperors. Eventually, the throne fell to Diocletian, a man of military background, who finally stabilized the empire. Under Diocletian, Rome regained a relative advantage over external enemies for over a century. However, countless once prosperous cities were already in decline. The situation in the western half of the empire was especially bleak. Cities were depopulated, either due to violence or flight to rural areas. After years of warfare and economic crisis, their populations could no longer regroup to rebuild their communities. Trade collapsed, and currency devaluation crippled the Roman economy. Many cities across the empire, including Rome itself, which had once needed no fortifications, were now forced to surround themselves with deep moats and high walls. The Roman Empire faced several fundamental problems. First, the imperial succession was never clearly defined, allowing the military, the Senate, and other factions to manipulate the process of making emperors. Second, the empire's vast territorial expanse had long outgrown the capacity of a single ruler. This had been a problem even in the late Republic. By now, no emperor could manage multiple fronts against a wide array of invaders. Nonetheless, Diocletian's reforms broke the cycle of military usurpation. He initially shared power with a co-emperor, and in 293 CE, he formally established the Tetrarchy, or Rule of 4. Historians view this as the end of the 58-year-long crisis. However, civil wars resumed after Diocletian's abdication. His 4 emperors ultimately turned against one another. The internal strife did not end until the rise of Constantine the Great. The Western Roman Empire would persist until 476 CE, while the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as Byzantium, would survive until 1453 CE. As for why the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 CE, historians have proposed countless explanations for this monumental historical event. However, I believe many of these attempts are ultimately fruitless exercises in wordplay. A Chinese observer with both moral conscience and intellectual insight, and without the burden of nationalism or imperial nostalgia, may offer the most penetrating and accurate conclusion. The real reason for the empire's fall is precisely what historians John Fairbank and Roderick McFarher have noted in their studies of Chinese history. De facto reality becomes the sole basis of legitimacy. In other words, Rome's collapse is not a mysterious accident, it is the simple fact of power being lost. To borrow Mao Zedong's words, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun, or the old Chinese maxim, the victor becomes king, the loser, a criminal. Rome's tragic demise proves a universal lesson. Only by implementing universal values can humanity pursue its greatest goal, freedom, equality, and justice for every individual. And only when individuals pursue truth, goodness, and beauty can a state become enduring. Historians often define the period from the founding of the Severan dynasty in 193 CE to the rise of Diocletian in 284 CE as the late imperial period. The social, economic, and military crises that began during the latter part of the Antonine dynasty reached unprecedented proportions in the 3rd century. As a result, some scholars distinguish this phase as a discrete historical period known as the crisis of the 3rd century, 193 to 284 CE. This era was characterized by constant warfare, frequent changes in emperors, widespread uprisings among slaves and coloni, semi-free tenant farmers. One of the most significant revolts was the Bagaudi movement, which began in Gaul during the 260s CE. These rural insurgents, largely composed of impoverished peasants and landless laborers, posed a serious threat to the ruling class. Their uprisings reflected the deepening structural disintegration of the Roman economy and society. In 284 CE, Diocletian, then commander of the Praetorian Guard, was proclaimed emperor by the army. He seized imperial power and ended the Principate, replacing it with the Dominate, an absolute form of monarchy. He adopted the governing style and ceremonial practices of Eastern despotism and launched a series of far-reaching reforms, later known as the Diocletian Reforms. His successor, Constantine I, abolished the Tetrarchy and became the sole ruler of the empire by 324 CE, thereby restoring unified authority. Under his rule, imperial power was significantly strengthened. In 330 CE, he built a new capital, Constantinople, on the site of ancient Byzantium. Most notably, in 313 CE, he issued the Edict of Milan, which granted legal status to Christianity, ending centuries of persecution. After Constantine's death, civil wars once again erupted, inflicting heavy blows on the empire. In 395 CE, following the death of Theodosius I, the Roman Empire was officially divided into two separate entities, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as Byzantium. In the Western Roman Empire, persistent economic crises, population decline, land abandonment, and urban decay all contributed to a gradual weakening of the state. In 410 CE, the Visigoth king Alaric I sacked the city of Rome. In 452 CE, the Hunnic king Attila invaded the Italian peninsula. On June 2, 455 CE, the Vandals stormed Rome and inflicted catastrophic destruction. During this time, various barbarian kingdoms were established within the former imperial territories, such as the Visigothic kingdom, the Vandalan kingdom, the Burgundian kingdom, and the Ostrogothic kingdom. Finally, in September 476 CE, the Gothic military commander Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, marking the formal end of the Western Roman Empire. Summary of key factors in the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. 1. Internal corruption. The decline of Roman institutions, political corruption, moral decay, and the erosion of civic responsibility, seriously undermined imperial stability. 2. Political struggles. Continuous internal power struggles and civil wars fractured the leadership and weakened central authority. 3. The rise of Christianity. The rise of Christianity deeply transformed Roman spiritual life and cultural identity, challenging traditional Roman religious and imperial ideologies. 4. Barbarian invasions. The repeated incursions by various Germanic and nomadic tribes devastated Roman military power and economic resources. Unlike the Western Roman Empire, which collapsed amid prolonged internal strife and barbarian invasions, the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, retained considerable vitality by relying on the stable agricultural economy of the East. By the 6th century, the Byzantine state had reached a new peak. Under the reign of Justinian the Great, it nearly reconquered the entire territory of the old Roman Empire. However, after reaching its height, the empire entered a period of decline. Ancient economic, political, and military institutions once again came under pressure, this time from the southward migrating Slavs, the westward advancing Persians, and the newly rising Arab Muslims. Following the growing pains of the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire, with the loss of much of North Africa and the Near East, underwent a process of feudalization in economy and military, absolutism in political institutions, Hellenization of culture, and adoption of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. This internal transformation enabled a resurgence of strength, and the empire entered a new period of prosperity in the early 11th century. However, by the late 11th century, the empire faced a new external threat, the Seljuk Turks. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, in seeking military aid from the Roman Catholic West, unknowingly sowed the seeds of Byzantium's downfall. The Crusades inflicted devastating damage on the Byzantine Empire. Years of war and external plunder shattered its once stable agrarian economy. Western feudal knights, through their land seizures, further undermined the centralized bureaucratic system. But the most catastrophic blow came in 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, when Constantinople, the imperial capital, was captured and brutally sacked by crusaders led by Enrico Dandolo, the Doge of Venice. Although the Byzantines managed to retake the city in 1261, the restored empire never regained its former strength. From that point onward, Byzantium declined into a marginal power in the eastern Mediterranean, surviving precariously until May 29, 1453, when it was finally conquered by Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire. The remaining branches of the Byzantine royal house, namely the Despotate of the Morea, in the Peloponnese, and the Empire of Trebizond, also fell soon after. The Despotate was conquered in 1460, and Trebizond was captured on August 15, 1461. With that, the Byzantine Empire and all its successor states were completely extinguished. Throughout the history of the Western Roman Empire, several root causes of decline become clear. 1. Internal corruption. The internal decay of Roman social and political institutions was one of the key factors in its collapse. Political corruption, moral degeneration, and the disintegration of traditional social structures all undermined the empire's long-term stability. 2. Power struggles. Endless internal political rivalries and succession conflicts weakened the unity of the empire and eroded the legitimacy of imperial authority. These divisions led to frequent civil wars and leadership crises. 3. The rise of Christianity. The rise of Christianity profoundly altered Rome's spiritual foundations. The new faith challenged Rome's traditional polytheistic worldview and weakened the ideological cohesion of the empire. 4. Barbarian invasions. The repeated incursions by various barbarian tribes, Visigoths, Vandals, Huns, and others, devastated Rome's military capacity and drained its resources. These invasions not only shrank Rome's territory but also compromised its political sovereignty. In the medieval Eastern Roman Empire, commonly referred to as the Byzantine Empire, unlike its Western counterpart that had perished amidst prolonged civil strife and barbarian migration, the East preserved a degree of institutional vitality by relying on its stable agricultural economy. By the 6th century, the empire's strength resurged under Justinian the Great, who nearly reconquered the full extent of the former Roman Empire. However, as always, glory was followed by decline. The ancient structures of economy, politics, and the military once again came under immense strain. The southward expansion of the Slavs, the westward push of the Persians, and the emergence of the Arab Muslims posed existential threats to the Byzantine world. After enduring the convulsions of the 7th century and losing vast territories in North Africa and the Near East, the Byzantine Empire reconstituted itself through feudalization of the economy and military, autocratization of its political system, Hellenization of its culture, and transformation into an Orthodox Christian theocracy. This internal restructuring rekindled the empire's vitality, leading to a period of cultural and economic prosperity in the early 11th century. However, in the late 11th century, facing invasions from the Seljuk Turks, Emperor Alexios I Komnenos sought military aid from Catholic Western Europe, an act that, in hindsight, planted the seeds of Byzantium's eventual demise.